the Empire State. From the financial and entertainment epicenter of New York City to the sleeping and empty small cities and towns of upstate, which once bustled with manufacturing, mining, and farming. We all know from inspiration, history, and nature, we deserve a return to the success and growth of generations past, a birthright being squandered by corruption in Albany, and the depredations of an insecure, scheming mountebank posing as governor, who loathes both us and himself. As liberty beckoned to enslaved peoples behind the Iron Curtain via American broadcasts after World War II, we now say, believe, rise, and join us. Welcome to Radio Free New York.
Hello, everybody. I'm your host, Andrew Hollister. Welcome to Radio Free New York. Last show, we were talking about student debt legislation, and I know I promised you guys I would try to get us to the Mueller Report, which I was not able to do. So today we're going to try to cover both of those. We're going to finish up education legislation, specifically student loan debt. Then we're going to move on to the Mueller Report. And then lastly, I want to talk with you guys about Republicans supporting the extreme risk protection order or red flag laws on a national level. Those are the three things I'm hoping that we get to cover today. But before we jump into that, I just want to thank you guys for joining me here on the show. I want to welcome everybody who's jumping in online. I see people on Twitter. Chip is jumping in. We've got Michelle here on Facebook, and I see a whole bunch of other people joining into the show right now. Those of you who are watching on the live stream, I know there was an audio delay with the video. Let me know if that's been resolved. I made some tweaks, and hopefully it's better for you. Tony, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for joining us. As always, I can take comments, questions on the live streaming services. We're on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Periscope, but also you can call in on the show if you'd like. Call in live with your question or comment. That number is 585-346-3000. And before we jump in and get started, I also want to ask you guys to consider supporting the show. So the link is in the comments, but if you're listening on the radio and you want to help support Radio Free New York, keep us on the airwaves, you would go to AYR.show. So that stands for all your rights.show, not .com. And you can click on the support link at the top and make a donation or purchase a Radio Free New York t-shirt or hoodie. That just helps us stay on the air, keeps us going, and helps me continue to be with you each week, bringing you the content that you guys keep coming and looking for. So I would really appreciate it. You know, maybe it's worth $5 to you, maybe it's worth 15, maybe it's worth 50, whatever that might be. If you guys head over there and support the show, I would greatly appreciate it. Definitely helps me take the time out of my day to do the research I do for you guys to bring these issues to light, and also spend the time on the air making that happen for you. So without further ado, let's talk about student debt legislation. Now, if you heard Monday's show, you're probably brought up to speed, but I want to, for anybody who didn't hear Monday's show, just give a real brief recap so you guys know what I'm talking about. So on Monday's show, I brought up the fact that there's been a lot of student debt legislation being proposed. Some of it's on a state level, some of it's on a national level, but it's rising as a really big issue. Some of this legislation that's being discussed right now is the idea of just total debt forgiveness on student loans, free college. There's things like refinancing student loans with government-issued bonds, which is kind of interesting. We're going to touch on that a little bit. The idea of being able to file for bankruptcy and have student loans forgiven in bankruptcy, which right now they are not forgiven if you go to bankruptcy court. And then other interesting bills being proposed, such as making it so that when you as an employer hire somebody, you become responsible for their student loans, which I think is ridiculous. And that's a great way to ensure that nobody with student loans ever gets hired. And then there's some other ones that kind of relate to that, where they propose that an employer would get an incentive for helping people pay back their student loans, which to me is interesting because that I haven't fully read that proposal yet, but it sounds like the government picking and choosing winners and losers, and the government basically saying if you have employees with student debt, maybe you get an advantage over companies that don't. And to me, that's totally wrong. So maybe next week I'll try to do some additional research on that particular proposal, bring it to you guys, and let you know truly what I think about it, and if I think it's a bad thing. It sounds like a bad thing right out of the gate, but I could be wrong. So I'll do some research for you. I also want to give you guys the numbers. This is why this is so important to people right now. The student loan debt in the United States is $1.56 trillion, not million, not billion, trillion. So that's a huge number. And there's 44.7 million Americans with student loan debt. So that's not a small number either. We're talking about a lot of Americans that have this student debt. And of all these student loans that are out there, over 11% of them are already 90 days past due or already in default. So we're talking about a lot of money owed, a lot of people in debt, a lot of debt that's past due. So it's an issue. It's a very big issue. And the debt that's created by student loans is about $500 billion more than U.S. credit card debt. That number is actually $521 billion. So we're talking about just a lot of money across the board. Now, one could make the argument that that debt is okay because it's investment debt. It's debt that you're taking on with the idea that you're going to invest in a better future. And I would say that might have been true 20 years or so ago. But the way I see it right now, people aren't getting their investment back. You know, these student loans turn out to be lifetime commitments that people do not pay them off until they start getting near retirement. And they don't necessarily have a better life because of it. In fact, they're working 2, maybe 3 jobs to even keep up with their student loan payments. And then on top of that, the actual diplomas that they're getting, the degrees that they're getting, end up not being relevant to the job they want to get into. They end up maybe preventing them from getting a job because there's so much credential inflation. So kind of overall, this is really a major issue in the United States right now. And just to kind of compare and contrast, you know, one European country that I'm familiar with is Czech Republic, and their annual tuition costs for college, I think it's Charles University, it's one of like the most prestigious colleges in Europe, I think the annual tuition is about $1,500, and they're actually have had some issues with that. They say this is incredibly expensive, versus here in the United States, I think the average is about $33,000. So that's a huge issue because there's such a big gap, and based on, you know, looking at the education you get between those two colleges or those two education tracks, they're fairly equal. So there's just a big financial gap there. So the first thing I want to talk about is this legislation that was proposed with the idea that there would be a refinance done by government bonds to bring down the interest rates on these student loans. And what was interesting to me is I didn't really totally understand how government bonds worked, which is why I didn't talk about it last show, because I had very little knowledge of it. I'm not professing to have an enormous amount of knowledge about it right now, but I did do a little bit of research that I just want to bring to you guys as my listeners, so you guys know what these government bonds are for, kind of the idea of what this government bond refinance would do. And then we can talk about whether or not it's a good idea. So the government bond, this is Investopedia, which is a website that has some decent information about finance, investing, various type of funds and how they work. So just their definition of what a government bond is. A government bond is a debt security issued by a government to support government spending. Before investing in government bonds, investors need to assess several risks associated with the country, such as country risk, political risk, inflation risk, and interest rate risk. Although the government usually has a low credit risk, federal government bonds in the United States include savings bonds, treasury bonds, and treasury inflation protected securities. Now, here's the thing, right off the bat, I'm concerned about this. I'm really concerned because right in the beginning, it says that a government bond is a debt security issued by a government to support government spending. So this is just more debt being taken on by the government because they haven't raised enough tax revenue for their spending. The next piece here that I want to talk about is the idea that these government bonds, they're considered low risk investments, but also low gain back investments. Here's the thing. When you buy a government bond, you're essentially getting a loan or giving a loan to the government and expecting interest back on the government. Once again, my big issue with this is the idea that government is overspending. They're spending more money than they have to issue these bonds, and then they have to collect that money back plus interest with taxes to pay these bonds back, to pay the taxes back on these bonds. So to me, the idea that we would refinance a student loan or a large sum of student loan debt with government bonds really just means, to me, it's a really bad idea, because now what we're doing is we're taking more money that the government hasn't been able to raise, and creating a situation where we're going to have to raise more tax dollars to pay out this interest. So to me, not a good idea at all. Government bonds, to me, sound like a bad idea. I'd be open to ideas as to why a government bond might be a good idea, and I'd be open to hear that. Tomorrow I'm actually meeting with a financial advisor, so I'll kind of run it by him and see what he says and maybe give you his take on Monday morning. But we are at the quarter of the hour, so we're going to take a real quick break here, and then we're going to talk about maybe how we could address student debt, the idea of how we could resolve the public education system, and more so the student debt and credential inflation. So we'll be back here in a moment on Radio Free New York.
Your business relies on computers and technology to operate. Slow, unreliable networks and servers can cause unplanned downtime and affect your bottom line. The experts at Simple Tech Innovations are here to help. Their preventative maintenance program ensures that your computers and network are kept up to date and monitored for any issues, keeping your business running smoothly. They also help clients achieve HIPAA, PCI, and New York State cybersecurity compliance to keep your network safe and secure. Whatever your business IT needs are, Simple Tech Innovation should be your first call. They've won the Best in Rochester 8 years in a row and have an A+ Better Business Bureau rating. Call them today for a free consultation at 585-200-3182. That's 585-200-3182. Simple Tech Innovations.
Avon Feed and Supply announces a new taste in local cheese. From dairies in Livingston, Genesee, and Wyoming counties, enjoy Craig's Creamery Cheese from 8 family farms made right here in Livingston County. Craig's Creamery Cheese, simply made with all natural ingredients. Choose your favorite variety exclusively in our area at Avon Feed and Supply, bottom of the hill, West Main Street in the village of Avon. MasterCard, Visa, and Discover cards always welcome.
Why do businesses choose to move their website from Wix and Squarespace to SimpleTech Innovations? Maybe it's their excellent customer service or attention to detail. Maybe it's their ability to give a truly customized solution. Or perhaps they just like the fact that SimpleTech is a local small business that builds great relationships with its clients. Whatever the reason may be, you can rest assured knowing that the local team at SimpleTech has your best interest in mind when building or updating your website. They're hands-on and love helping customers achieve their goals. But don't take my word for it. They've won the best in Rochester 8 years in a row and have an A+ Better Business Bureau rating. If your website doesn't match your dreams or isn't achieving your goals, give the professionals at SimpleTech Innovations a call today for a consultation at 585-200-3182. That's 585-200-3182. SimpleTech Innovations.
You're listening to Radio Free New York
on the WYSL stations.
All right, everybody, welcome back to Radio Free New York. I was just checking through the comments on social media. Want to welcome a few more of you guys to the show. Bo, Joe, Louise, thank you guys so much joining. And Larry Sharp's on the live stream too. So Larry, thank you so much for tuning in. Larry's actually going to be on the radio with me in about 2 weeks. I think it's April 15th. I'll double check for you guys. But we're going to have Larry in here and we're going to absolutely have some fun. So a little plug for that show coming up. I think it's Monday, April 15th. I'll find out on the next break. So we're talking about education here. We're talking about the issue with student debt in our country right now. We're talking about how the debt is just so enormous. People aren't getting their money's worth from colleges. They're not being able to pay back their student debt. And there's a lot of proposals kind of rolling in with everybody's different ideas as to how we can resolve this issue. And I want to tell you guys how I really believe we can resolve the student debt issue, and nobody's proposing it. Nobody that I've seen is proposing this sort of stuff, except for maybe Larry Sharp. Larry Sharp and I are definitely on the same page with a lot of this stuff, and I'm sure he's talking about this too. But the very first, the number one thing that we could do to resolve the student debt crisis in this nation is starting by fixing K through 12. K through 12 is really failing us in this country right now, especially in New York State. K through 12 is really not preparing students for college. So now what's happening is kids go to college, and instead of hitting the ground running, instead of going in, doing what they need to do, getting that education and getting out, their first year of college is 13th grade. They're learning sometimes basic math, basic grammar, these sort of things in college before they even start their education track. The average 4-year degree today takes 6 years to complete. 6 years. A few years ago, it was 5, but the key thing here is a 4-year degree is taking 6 years. It's taking 2 additional years, which means 2 additional years of loans, 2 additional years of debt that you're acquiring, and 2 additional years that a lot of people aren't actually out working. So that's the first issue. The second issue is when kids go to college, they have an idea maybe of what they want, and then they end up changing it part of the way through once they kind of get a little taste of that major, a taste of that industry. We should totally transform K through 12. It should be K through 10. Those last 2 years of high school should be either college prep for the track that you want to be on in college. They should be trade school so that we can encourage the trades in this country, especially in New York State. Right now, we have a huge deficit of tradesmen. You know, your average tradesperson in New York State is over 50 years old. We desperately need young people in the trades. But in society, we've told people this lie. We've created this lie that the only way to success is through college. And while a college degree is a way to success, it's not the only way to success. You could have small business owners, you can have tradesmen, you can have so many other things that don't require a college degree. But instead, what we've done as society is we've created this idea that if you don't go to college, you're the dumb kid and you won't be successful. So what's happening is we've got kids who probably shouldn't be in college at all. They're hands-on. They should be in a trade. They should be in some other non-college dependent industry. But instead, we force them into school. We force them into debt. They go through the whole thing, and it's just not right for them. Then they get out of college. 6 years later, 6 figures in debt. They become a barista at your local coffee shop, making minimum wage, and they move back in with mom and dad. And they have no track to success still. They now have an enormous amount of student debt, and maybe a degree in something that doesn't even interest them, a degree in something that is the wrong industry for them to even get hired in. And what's worse is they can't accept a low-paying job in their industry because their student debt's too high. And if they accept that job, they'll lose certain benefits and be stuck where they can't pay off their loans, they can't pay their bills, and if they were to file for bankruptcy, they can't file for bankruptcy either because student loans aren't forgiven in bankruptcy. So step number 1 to resolve this education student debt crisis, fix K through 12. Let's move to K through 10. At 16 years old, these kids decide, do they want to go to college? If they do, great, go to college prep. If they want to be in a trade, awesome, go to trade school. Maybe they want to get into the workforce right away at 16 years old. I did that. I had my first job at 15. By 16, I had been working multiple jobs. I built a work ethic. I understood what it was to show up to work on time, for a team of people to depend on me. This is something that we've taken away from young people. We've taken away the idea that they can be successful at a young age, that they can have this type of responsibility at a young age, and the idea that they should learn this at a young age. Now we've got kids that are in college, 21, 22, 24, 26 years old, and they still can't even make it to class on time at 10 o'clock in the morning because they didn't have the experience needed of how important it is to be on time to something. So that's step 1. Step 2 that I think is really, really important is the idea of credential inflationing. This is happening all across the nation. I walked by a McDonald's not so long ago, and this isn't the first time I've seen this, and there was a sign up that said, have a college degree, ? Apply here. And the whole idea that to get a job at McDonald's, they're now suggesting that you need a degree, a 4-year degree from college to work a minimum wage job that there are basic minimal skills necessary to perform is terrible. The idea that you should go, 5-6 figures into debt to work a minimum wage job that has minimal skills required is a very, very bad thing. Just like electricians, plumbers, HVAC specialists, auto mechanics, like any of the trades, we should not be expecting college degrees for people in these trades. We should absolutely be working on making sure that trade school is efficient and an option for people, because trade school gives you hands-on experience, which in my particular profession, I'm an IT specialist. I work with computers, I work with security, I do data cabling, I do a whole bunch of stuff. And when people come in and they interview with me, hands down, every single time that somebody walks through the door, when they come in with a college degree, the college degree is so far behind. They haven't learned anything that I really need for them to learn. I end up being responsible for doing all of that training. Compared to somebody that goes through, say, an A+ certification or some sort of IT trade school, and they have a certificate instead of a college degree, they come in way more prepared. They have the hands-on skills, and I can get them set, running, and going very quickly with minimal training. And that's really what we need in my industry, and I know in a lot of others. So that's the next thing. Let's eliminate credential inflation. Let's get things going to the point where we're not sending every single person off to college, because let's be honest, college is not right for everyone. And to take a box and try to squish every single student in that box is totally wrong. We need to think outside of the box. We need to give students options, and we need to start them at a younger age. The next part I already hit on, which is investing in the trades. I can't stress that enough. We really, really need tradesmen in this state. We have such a shortage. We need to tell children that it's okay to be in the trades, that it's a valuable part of society, that we need this, because I tell you what, just about everybody I know, they need heat in their house come wintertime. You probably want running water for your toilet and your sink. When you flip the switch, you hope that the electricity comes on. If the trades die, we're going to be in a terrible, terrible situation. The other thing that I think is really, really important here is the idea that government funds schooling. So I think one of the reasons college education has gotten so expensive is because there's so many government programs available to pay for it. So you go in as a student and you get a bunch of government grants and government this and government that, and now your $40,000 a year tuition racks itself down to maybe $12,000, and then the rest of that student debt. I don't think that's a good idea. I don't think it's a good idea at all. And some of you might sit there and go, well, what about the underprivileged? What about, certain communities that can't get into college well? I'll definitely address that. But first, I want to talk about the idea of government picking winners and losers. Let's be really honest with ourselves here. Government is terrible at that. Government's job is not to pick winners and losers, not in business, not in education, not in anything else. Government should not have their hands in that sort of stuff. Government's purpose is to protect our rights, and that's it. Government should not have their hands in funding higher education. Government should not be creating grants, because all they're doing is taking money out of one person's pocket and putting it into another person's pocket. And government is choosing whose pocket it goes into. Now, the question comes up, well, what about those who are underprivileged? Well, I'll tell you what. Before government was giving out grants, nonprofits, churches, and individuals who thought that that was really important donated money, created scholarships, created their own programs, voluntarily funded to help those people. I'm one of those people. I actually help people raise money so that they can help underprivileged communities. It's all voluntary. The government's not involved at all. So it's totally possible. It can totally happen. We just have to actually let it happen. Looks like we're coming up on a half hour here, guys. So I'm going to take a real quick break. When we come back from the break, we will wrap up the discussion on education, and we're going to move on to the Mueller Report.
You're listening to the voice of liberty. AM 1040 Avon, Rochester, FM 92.1 Rochester, FM 95.5 Spencerport, and WYSL1040.com everywhere.
Why do businesses choose to move their website from Wix and Squarespace to SimpleTech Innovations? Maybe it's their excellent customer service or attention to detail. Maybe it's their ability to give a truly customized solution. Or perhaps they just like the fact that SimpleTech is a local small business that builds great relationships with its clients. Whatever the reason may be, you can rest assured knowing that the local team at SimpleTech has your best interest in mind when building or updating your website. They're hands-on and love helping customers achieve their goals. But don't take my word for it. They've won the best in Rochester 8 years in a row and have an A+ Better Business Bureau rating. If your website doesn't match your dreams or isn't achieving your goals, give the professionals at Simple Tech Innovations a call today for a consultation at 585-200-3182. That's 585-200-3182. Simple Tech Innovations.
We'll treat you like a family at Mark's Pizzeria. We'll treat you like a family at Mark's Pizzeria. Great pizza, fresh and good. Simply the best in your neighborhood. Come in, we'll get to know you. We'll call you by name. We can bring it to you any time of the day. Mark's Pizzeria. We'll treat you like a family. Mark's Pizzeria.
Your business relies on computers and technology to operate. Slow, unreliable networks and servers can cause unplanned downtime and affect your bottom line. The experts at Simple Tech Innovations are here to help. Their preventative maintenance program ensures that your computers and network are kept up to date and monitored for any issues, keeping your business running smoothly. They also help clients achieve HIPAA, PCI, and New York State cybersecurity compliance to keep your network safe and secure. Whenever your business IT needs are, Simple Tech Innovation should be your first call. They've won the best in Rochester 8 years in a row and have an A+ Better Business Bureau rating. Call them today for a free consultation at 585-200-3182. That's 585-200-3182. Simple Tech Innovations.
Radio Free New York on WYSL.
AM 1040, FM 92.1, and FM 95.5 West.
All right, guys, welcome back to Radio Free New York. I'm your host, Andrew Hollister, and we're just wrapping up the discussion right now about education, the student debt crisis, and the idea that there's just way too much student debt out here. And a lot of people are proposing things that I just plain out don't agree with. Everybody's proposing this idea that to fix student debt, to address this crisis, that we need government involved. We need government to come in and create more regulation, to bail out certain people, to forgive certain debt, to refinance through bonds, all of this stuff. I think that government is what's causing the problem. Our public school system failing to prepare students for college, government and society saying that students need college to be successful, credential inflation, all of this stuff. I think that this is what's causing the issue, and to address it, we need to go through and we need to reverse some of this stuff. I don't think the answer is more government. The answer is less government, less regulation. And to that point, my last thing that I want to say that we should do to resolve this student debt crisis is we need to make student debt just like any other debt. It should be forgiven in bankruptcy court. There is no reason in my mind that government should be picking and choosing what debt is forgivable and what debt isn't forgivable. My guess is that the only reason that exists today is because of lobbyists, corporate lobbyists, because college education is a business. And I know a lot of people don't look at education as a business. They look at it, some people look at education as a basic human right. Some other people look at education as a public service. And a lot of times people don't like the idea or they don't like to admit, or they don't like to realize that education and college education is a business. It's a business model where you take money and you pay somebody and you receive a service or a product. It is a business. That's exactly what it is. So why should student debt be unforgivable, but other debt should be forgivable? I think it's a double standard. I think government's picking winners and losers. I think that needs to go away. Student debt should fall under the same bankruptcy rules as any other type of debt, hands down. So one thing I didn't mention to you guys, we are broadcasting live. We're live on WYSL. We're live on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. And I am actually transmitting from home again. I had a couple people ask how my wife is doing because she had a tonsillectomy. For those of you who might not be familiar with that, that is having her tonsils removed. And it's my understanding that if you're a kid, that's no big deal. You go in, you get your tonsils out, you watch cartoons all week, you don't go to school, and then you're kind of up and running, good to go. But as an adult, it's actually a more difficult procedure. The recovery time is just harder to get through. And as I was doing some research on that, one of the things that was very interesting to me is that every time you have a sore throat, your tonsils actually build up scar tissue and they become harder and tougher, which is part of the reason why the tonsillectomy is much worse for an adult. So she is getting through it, but pretty much anywhere you do research, and the doctor said this as well, that on day 5 to 8, things start to get kind of worse before they get better. So she's going through that right now. She's not feeling so great, which is why I'm home with her, helping take care of her, making sure that she's got as much water as she needs and the little chewy candies and stuff to make sure that she's good to go. So for those of you who are asking, she is on the path to recovery. She's just not quite there yet, but she will be. So thank you so much for asking about that. And I want to welcome just a few more people to the show. Carrie and some other people jumped in here on YouTube and Twitter as well. Sean, thank you guys so much for joining the show. If you guys do have any questions or you want to call into the show with a question, you can call into the show. The number is 585-346-3000. Once again, that's 585-346-3000. And the next thing we're going to discuss is the Mueller Report. So I'm sure that at this point, everybody in the nation's discussed it. I was hoping to get to it on Monday, but we just ran out of time. You guys had a lot of questions, a lot of comments, which was just absolutely amazing. And let me just check to make sure. Oh, we have somebody on the line, actually. So let me turn up my volume here. Looks like we've got Terry from Fairport on the line. Terry, welcome to the show.
Hey. I have a question. I want some feedback from you. I look at the university as a big money-making machine. And the more that, and as you know, the more that students are given in the way of loans, the more tuition seems to go up in these universities. But my question is, do you see any reason why they should not be paying taxes? I consider them
no, actually, that's a great point. So I personally, and I think probably a lot of listeners are going to disagree with me on this. I don't know. Maybe you will, maybe you won't. I think the idea that nonprofits don't pay taxes is totally wrong. I think that that's government picking winners and losers. And the thing that people will bring up often, they'll bring up education and they will bring up churches. And I get that in America, we have a very strong bond with religion, especially the Christian churches and the Christian sects. I totally understand that. I grew up as a Baptist. I went to church every single Sunday and almost every single Wednesday my entire childhood and teenage life. I totally understand it. But we as a nation have separation of church and state. And I don't believe that any nonprofit should be tax exempt at all. Now, I'm sure that a bunch of people are going to jump on the comments. Maybe you guys jump on the phone and you're going to tell me that you believe otherwise. That's fine. We can disagree on that. But the fact that educational institutions, not only do they not pay property tax, they don't pay sales tax either. And I see big universities, especially in the Rochester area, who profit in the tune to the billions, 980 million here, 1.4 billion there. And for those of you who are wondering, maybe you don't fully understand what profit means. Profit means they've paid all their staff, they've paid their electric bill, they've paid all their expenses for the year, and that's what's left over. Billions and billions of dollars. To me, there's no reason at all that we should be allowing these type of organizations to avoid tax, whether they are public, whether they are private. To me, they should all be paying tax. And that's just my personal view on it. That's always been that way. I know there's a lot of people that disagree with me.
I noticed there's a lot of universities that also own a lot of property off campus, beautiful homes and stuff that they use for sororities and other reasons. So there's a lot of prime property that they're also not paying property taxes on.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. A lot of schools have mansions for their presidents that their presidents move into when they become employed by the school. They have a ton of acres and acres, hundreds and hundreds of acres, if not thousands of acres, and locally too. I mean, this is something that happens locally here in Rochester, and they say, well, it's for research purposes, or it's for Greek living, like you said, the sorority and fraternity houses. Here's the thing about this. They charge their students in upwards of $10,000 to $12,000 a year, if not more, to live in this, quote, on-campus housing. So they're charging rent, and they're not paying taxes. They're not paying property tax. I don't know that they're paying income tax either. So to me, yeah, it's a huge part of the market. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry that's being taxed unfairly compared to other industries. Absolutely.
Right. Thank you.
Oh. All right. So, Tony, thank you so much for the call. Guys, if anybody else wants to call in, feel free to call. Number is 346-3000. Definitely jump in on the conversation here. Just so you know, since I'm at home, I have to just check to see if the radio station sends me a text message. So if you're on hold for a little bit, that's just because I'm checking the text message. Actually, it looks like Tony from Penfield is on the line. So, Tony, welcome to the show. I think you're becoming a regular.
Well, thanks, Andrew. I've been trying to catch it a little bit more, and I certainly enjoy hearing your views and such. And yeah, I wanted to address your point about student debt being immune from bankruptcy. And I think
go ahead.
The difference is that there is no collateral for it. So in other words, like when I take a loan for a house or something like that, there's the house itself that stands behind it, possibly the down payment I put and such, and so, or cars, things like that. So if I borrow a lot of stuff and the banks are careful, when I declare bankruptcy, they can still come in and take many of those things. Usually they can't take a house and a primary car. But if you squander a lot of stuff buying cool yachts and things like that, they're going to come in, they're going to take the yacht. Whereas with education, not if you don't pay it back, they can't scoop the knowledge out of your brain. And so if the students can escape that by a bankruptcy, no one's going to loan them money.
Yeah, actually, that's a phenomenal point, and I thank you for bringing that up. I would say my take on it is the education that you're receiving is supposed to get you a good job. That's kind of the marketing piece behind education. You purchase education with the idea that you'd be getting a good job. So if you follow the student loan track and you go through and you acquire the 6 figures of debt, $100,000, $150,000. I met somebody the other day, $250,000 in debt, so $250,000 in debt. The idea is that that's an investment that you're making under the impression that the school tells you that you're going to make a living off of this and that you will be able to afford paying back these loans. So if the schools are creating false advertising where they're saying, you will make enough money to pay this back, and then you don't, I don't know that the collateral is anything more than their promise that you're going to make money or that you're going to get an income that makes it so you can afford to pay it back. I agree totally. There's not a physical thing that they can take, but they're giving you the assumption and selling you and marketing to you that this track is going to make you enough money to live, support your family, and pay their debt back. And if that's not what they're giving you, I would say that's like false advertising. So I think the collateral is the idea that they're giving you an idea or giving you an education that you can get a job with.
Well, I think you're conflating in terms of, sure, the university is going to tell you that, oh, yes, come here and you'll have a wonderful degree and be able to pay stuff back. But they're not the ones guaranteeing the loans. It's banks and the government and such, you know, and so the university is not on the hook for this money. And so you've got a non sequitur there.
Yeah, no, and that's a great point, too. And I would say perhaps banks would stop giving loans for things that people can't pay back. You know, we saw this with the mortgage industry. When the mortgage industry basically blew up, it's because they were giving out loans to people that could not pay them back. So I see education as the same things. You know, government's giving out loans, private banks, you know, all these institutions are giving out these loans on a product that is not actually able to be paid back, either because of the quality of the product that the students are receiving. Maybe the schools aren't being picky enough about the students they take in. So I think if we actually went down the road that you couldn't file bankruptcy, I think either one of two things would happen, maybe both. I think education would start to get better. And I think that the schools would actually start accepting students kind of along the track of students that will be successful and will be able to pay it back, because otherwise the banks aren't going to give the loans anymore.
Right, and I agree with that in terms of, the banks are going to be much more shrewd because right now the government is on the hook or the person is on the hook for their entire lives to pay back this student loan. So I just want to point out that, that was a deal, and so I agree with you that if we make it so those can be discharged in bankruptcy, the lenders are going to be much more careful. And I also agree in terms of the cost of education, something I like that Larry Sharp mentioned when he was here in Rochester talking about the cost of schools, is all of these burdens that are placed on the schools by the state and the federal government. Title IX is a common one in universities, where you cannot imagine the staff involved in trying to enforce a one-sentence law. And like Larry's point was, hey, stop, because the feds can't enforce that on local schools unless they take federal money. And Larry's point was, give back the federal money. You'll be further ahead by just not taking that and lowering your costs by getting rid of that staff and all those enforcements and such. Yeah,
no, absolutely. I would say that the biggest thing that creates slavery in our nation today is debt. And the only way to get out of it is to stop accepting money from the federal government, stop accepting money from the state. That's the only way schools and other organizations are going to be free, truly free, is when they make the decision to say, no, we won't take this money anymore. Tony, thank you so much for the call. Always enjoy talking with you. Guys, I promised you I'd talk about the Mueller Report, so I'm gonna jump on it because I don't want to miss it 2 days in a row. I do want to welcome Eric, Beth, and Dan to the show. Guys, thank you so much. I'm gonna try to cruise through the Mueller Report in the next 8-ish minutes. I'm gonna take it from an angle that maybe some other people have spoken about, maybe they haven't. So the first thing I want to talk about here is, well, I'll tell you guys why I'm hoping to address. One is whether or not it should be released. The other is how much we've spent on it, and then how broken our criminal justice system is and how broken our political system is. I'm thinking I don't have enough time to cover all of that, but I'm going to try to sprint through it. So first thing is, for those who maybe don't know what the Mueller Report is, if you don't, just Google it. I mean, it's on like everything right now. It's a 300-page report basically about whether or not it was an investigation into whether or not the Trump campaign colluded with Russia to interfere with our election in 2016. So that's the basis of it. Right now, some of the hot topics are whether or not it should be released. Does it really exonerate Trump and his campaign? That sort of stuff. I'm going to address whether or not it should be released. I think that transparency in government is always the best answer. Always. Some people disagree with me, and on specific stuff that they're probably right. Certain stuff like classified material that protects our government and our nation from people who would do harm to us. I think there can be maybe some exemptions there, but it would have to be very, very clear as to what those exemptions are and why. But in general, like a public investigation that proves that our president didn't commit treason, which sounds like a really good thing to me. I think Democrats, Republicans, independents, libertarians, conservatives, doesn't matter where you sit on the political spectrum. If this report says that an investigation was done, it was done by people who seemed to oppose the president. It didn't seem that there was, that they were political friends or anything like that. Says that our president didn't commit treason. That to me is a good thing. We should all be hoping that our president didn't commit treason. But I think what we're seeing here is that people who just want to be upset and they're looking for things to be upset about. So it'll be interesting. But I think that a lot of people will not be satisfied until the full report comes out. So with that being said, I think transparency is the number one thing. We need to have some transparency here. Release a report. I understand that there's some things that are going to have to be redacted from the report. I think releasing it will be good. I think that there's people that won't be convinced no matter what. There are always going to be conspiracy theorists. There are always going to be people who are just doubtful of things. That's just the course of human nature. But I do believe that transparency is the number one best answer. The next thing I want to talk about is how much money this spent. That to me is a major tragedy for our country. $25 million spent on an investigation that it sounds like there wasn't much evidence for. So that to me is just, that's so wasteful. And you guys know that I'm really big on efficiency, being conservative as far as spending money, and wanting a much smaller government that cuts spending and lowers taxes. So when I see a waste of $25 million, that to me really felt as if, like, maybe there could have been collusion. I'm not saying that an investigation shouldn't have been done. I think that certainly an investigation should have happened, but did it have to cost $25 million? That to me is just an abuse of spending in our government. Interestingly, I found three things that you can buy with $25 million that I'll just share with you guys real quick. One is 25 parking spots in Manhattan. So here's looking at you, New York City. That is way too expensive. Way too expensive. Parking spots shouldn't cost that much. That's insane to me. Here's a local example. The Rochester City School District could run for 40 days, 40 days, for $25 million. I think we need to address that at some point. There's a spending issue there for sure. Here's a feel-good one. You could feed every single homeless veteran in the United States for 30 days with $25 million. That's according to Forbes. But also, it kind of makes you feel pretty bad. It's only 30 days. There's that many homeless veterans in our country. But there's certainly better ways we could be spending $25 million instead of investigating the president of our country. So with that being said, I want to talk about the idea of how bad our criminal justice system is right now. Because it's really a multi-tiered system, and it works kind of like this. If you can write a 6-figure check, you can get a fair trial. You can get a fair hearing. You can get a fair trial. If you can write a 7-figure check, you can get off on just about anything. This is how our system works right now. If you can write a 5-figure check or less, that's questionable. You might not get a fair trial. You may get a decent defense attorney. If you can only write a 4-figure check, you're probably better off just taking whatever plea they offer to you, because you're probably not going to get something better than that. So this, I think, brings up this whole trial, what's been spent, what's going on with it, I think brings up a really big issue in our country. This is how criminal justice works in our country, how we need some serious reform, how just throwing an accusation at somebody can put them in 5, 6, 7 figures in debt if they want a fair trial, if they want any chance at maintaining their freedom, even if they're innocent. So I have a big problem with that. Maybe on Monday's show, we can explore that a little bit more, and we can talk about some adjustments that need to be made in our criminal justice system, because it used to be innocent until proven guilty. And what I've seen with this trial and many, many others and other investigations, because this wasn't even a trial, this was just an investigation, but I see it in trials, is the idea that once somebody accuses you of something, it goes all over the news. It gets held against you. And that's what happens. You're basically considered guilty already. So, guys, we are out of time. Thank you so much for joining me here on Radio Free New York. I will be with you guys on Monday, 1 p.m., and I hope to hear from you guys then.